Welcome to the globalists. Welcome to the globalists. Welcome to the globalists. We're in a new set, a brand new set.
I am a globalist.
And I'm the globalist.
And I'm the globalist who wants to bring Chang right into your kitchen.
We change today, inspiring daily life. We create tomorrow, inspired by innovation. Change today, create tomorrow. Lotte.
대통령 윤석열을 파면한다.
Good evening. Welcome to Arirang TV's special coverage of South Korea's 21st presidential election. I'm Kim Mo-kyun. It's 10 p.m. in South Korea, which means the polls have closed, ballots are in, and the count has begun. This is no ordinary election. The nation was thrust into a compressed campaign season, forcing candidates to act fast and voters to decide quicker than ever before. Now the country is on the verge of choosing its next president, its 21st leader since democratization, in what many are calling a turning point for the nation. With public trust, economic stability, and regional security all hanging in the balance, tonight's outcome could redefine the trajectory of South Korea's future. Stay with us for live updates, real-time numbers, and comprehensive analysis as this historic night unfolds. So just hours after polls closed at 8 p.m., ballot counting is now in full swing at hundreds of counting stations across the country. So for more on how the process is unfolding on the ground, we turn to our reporter Park Kon-hoo, who is standing by at one of the counting stations tonight. Kon-hoo, good to have you with us.
Evening, Morgan.
So, Kon-hoo, could you walk us through what you're seeing over there and how's the ballot counting progressing in your location?
Of course. So I'm currently standing at one of the ballot counting stations across the country, which is set up at Seoul National University in Gwaneok District, southern Seoul. This is just one of the ballot counting stations, one of the 254 stations across the country and 25 here in Seoul. Voting, as you mentioned, has ended at 8 p.m. today, Korea time, and counting began shortly afterwards at around 8:30 p.m., starting from Pohang City in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. And where I'm standing now, it started around 9 p.m., so it's been about 1 or 2 hours since the counting process has started. As of 10 p.m., we just learned that the nationwide ballot counting rate stands at around 3.4%, and so far, the process has been running smoothly and orderly, I can say. Since the voter turnout had already surpassed that at the previous presidential election an hour before polls closed, the counting process is expected to take a bit more time. Now, about how the counting works. There are 8 key sections involved in this process. So first, after the ballot boxes are safely transported to counting stations under a police escort and election observers, they are received by the ballot reception team to check for any issues. Then the boxes are passed on to the box opening team, where the ballots are taken out and neatly organized. The ballots are then fed into a sorting machine that automatically classifies them by candidate. Introduced in 2002, this machine has significantly sped up the process. And the machines aren't connected to any network, making hacking them totally impossible. Classified ballots are known to be manually checked in this election for the first time. So the ballots are then moved to the review team, where they're manually checked once more to filter out any invalid votes. It then goes through the 2 final rounds of verification before being confirmed and officially announced by the commissioner. Early votes or votes from overseas are also being counted as soon as they arrive at the site.
Wow, it really sounds like a lengthy process indeed, and of course it's a crucial one. I understand that this election authorities are making every effort to ensure transparency throughout the ballot counting process. Kon-hoo, tell us more.
That's right. A total of around 70,000 personnel have been deployed nationwide. That includes election observers, 6 from each party with the candidate and 3 for each independent candidate. Police authorities raised the national emergency alert to its highest kapo since 6 a.m. this morning nationwide, enabling full mobilization. The National Fire Agency has been mobilized in case of emergencies as well. The National Election Commission expects the counting to be completed by 6 a.m. Wednesday, but normally the leading candidate is revealed earlier. In the 20th presidential election, the projected winner was announced at 2 a.m. due to a neck-and-neck race, and it was announced around 10 p.m. during the 19th election. This time, the projection is expected to be made around midnight, so I'll be bringing you more updates in our later newscast. And that's all I have for you now. Back to you, Morgan.
Thank you for that update, Kon-hoo. I'll speak to you again later. So now, as the nation awaits the final election results, the candidates and their parties are likely feeling the tension more than anyone else. So for a look at the atmosphere inside the major rival camps, we turn to our political correspondents on the ground. Let's begin with Shin Ha-young, who's standing by at the Democratic Party's headquarters. Ha-young, what's it like over there?
Morgan, I'm currently at the campaign headquarters of the Democratic Party of Korea, which is set up inside the National Assembly members' office building. And a few hours ago, when the exit poll predicted Lee with 51.7% of the vote, applause and cheers broke out here at the headquarters. But now, as you can see behind me, not many members of the election campaign committee are still here. And candidate Lee Jae-myung is not here yet, as he is currently at his home home in Incheon's Gyeonggu district. And regarding the exit poll results, DP floor leader and acting chairman Park Chun-dae, who also serves as the chair of the campaign committee, told reporters that the people have sent a strong message against the previous administration. And meanwhile, separate from this campaign headquarters, the DP is now holding an event at an outdoor stage in Yeouido near the National Assembly, where some party members and supporters are watching the vote count together. And he is expected to head there and deliver his speech once his victory becomes more certain. Mo-kyun?
Thank you for that, Ha-young. Let's now turn to our Kim Do-yeon, who's standing by at the People Power Party's campaign headquarters. Do-yeon, how's the mood over there at the moment?
Mo-kyun, many of the People Power Party members have left the Situation Room at 8:30, around 30 minutes after the exit polls came out. Now, there is no official response from the party about the election results, but of course, with the exit polls showing two-digit difference, it is a somber atmosphere here. The only thing we heard from the members to the media was the Kim Yong-tae, the interim leader, was that he'll be watching the vote. As he said that as he left from the situation. Now, Kim Moon-soo has not shown himself to the public yet either. He's currently at his home in southern Seoul. The result, to some camp members, well, the exit poll result was a surprise, as they believed a comeback was made during the past few days. Of course, there were no open surveys published, but they felt the momentum building. Kim, as you know, has consistently trailed DP's Lee Jae-myung in national polls, often well outside the margin of error, largely due to backlash over the martial law declaration and the impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. So there was a cautious hope that Kim's relentless campaign might have sparked a late turnaround, banking on support from shy conservatives and undecided voters, but at least the exit polls doesn't say so. That's all for now. Back to you, Mo-kyun.
So it looks like a contrasting atmosphere, but we'll have to see until the results are up. But thank you so much for bringing up the updates, Do-yeon and Ha-young. Do keep us updated throughout the night. Now let's turn to our Peunji, who's standing by at our election wall, where she'll walk us through the exit poll results and voter turnout figures with the numbers visualized in real time. Eunji, what can you tell us?
So, Mo-kyun, this year's election recorded a very high voter turnout, with many people heading to the polling stations, especially after the country went through 6 months of turmoil sparked by a failed martial law attempt, then followed by the impeachment of the president. The ballots are now being counted. While we wait for the final results, let's take a look at the exit polls first. Exit polls provided by South Korea's three main broadcasters, KBS, MBC, and SBS, show Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung is expected to earn more than 50%. People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo is expected to earn nearly 40%, followed by Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok with around 7%. Now, I will be bringing you updates on the election results soon, but before that, let's take a look at just how many people voted in this year's election. 79.4% of South Korean voters cast their ballots. That's nearly 8 in 10 of all eligible voters. Out of a total of around 45 million voters, over 35 million people have headed to the polling stations this year. Now, if we compare this to past presidential elections, the country has continued to see voter turnout of more than 70% since 2012. And this year's voter turnout is actually even higher than the previous election in 2022, when the figure was around 77%. Now, this year's high voter turnout was largely driven by early voting, which took place for 2 days last week. Early voting turnout recorded 34.7%, and this marks the second highest turnout for early voting in a nationwide election since the system was first introduced in 2014. And moving on to overseas voter turnout, it recorded an all-time high this year. 79.5% of South Korean nationals living or staying abroad headed to the polls. This is a lot higher than the overseas voter turnout in the previous election in 2022, when it recorded a little more than 70%. Now, I want to take a look at the numbers by region. Gwangju recorded the highest voter turnout with 83.9%, and Jeollanam-do province recorded 83.6%, both liberal strongholds. Now, before we take a closer look at those regions, let's take a closer look at the capital area first, a battleground region as this is the most populated area of the country, with a lot of independent voters that do not lean toward either the Democratic or Conservative parties. In the capital city Seoul, voter turnout recorded 80.1% over in Gyeonggi-do province. This is where both Democratic parties Lee Jae-myung and the People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo served as governor in the past. 79.4% of voters there headed to the polls. And in Incheon, 77.7% of voters have voted in this year's election. Now to the middle part of the country, I want to go over to Chungcheong-do provinces. Chungcheongbuk-do province is showing a voter turnout of 77.3%, followed by Chungcheongnam-do province with 76%. And these regions are very important to look at, as candidates who gain more votes in these Chungcheong-do provinces were not always but often elected as the president of South Korea, so we'll have to keep a close eye on those regions. Also in Sejong City, 83.1% of the voters have headed to the polls this year. Now I want to go over to liberal parts of the liberal strongholds. Jeollabuk-do province and Gwangju and Jeollanam-do province is showing a voter turnout of around 83%. So you can clearly see that many liberal voters have voted in this election. Now to the conservative strongholds. Gyeongsangbuk-do province and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces saw voter turnout of around 78%. In nearby conservative stronghold cities, Daegu and Ulsan recorded around 80% and Busan around 78%. Last but not least, Jeju recorded the lowest voter turnout of 74.6%. Now, we are likely to learn who the projected winner is at around midnight, so I will bring you more updates on that later on. Mogyun?
Now, while candidates and parties have dominated the headlines, the voices that matter the most in any election are those of the voters. My colleague An Sung-jin hit the streets to hear directly from citizens about what this presidential race has meant to them and what they hope to see moving forward.
The 21st presidential election has come to an end. From 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, more than 14,000 voting stations nationwide, including this one in Sadangdong, Dongjakgu, Seoul, were open. Starting early in the morning with the older members of the population showing up as soon as the polling stations opened, to families with young children, throughout the 14 hours of voting, people continue to show up to cast their ballots, right up until the last minute before polling stations closed.
This is my first vote ever, and I'm proud to be participating in it. I would like them to work on making Korea a better country to live in.
Now that I've finished voting, I'm going to go to work right away. I hope someone honest becomes the president.
Our economy is going through a difficult time right now, so I hope the new president can boost our economy domestically and internationally, and also improve people's livelihoods.
After they headed out of the polling booth, many were seen taking pictures in front of the polling station with a ballot stamp on their hand. This shows that a lot of Koreans are participating in an I voted movement. There are also these kinds of certification sheets with art or characters on them, where people can get stamps to show that they voted. Voters came to exercise their right to vote in hopes of electing a president who will lead South Korea through a pivotal period. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
So for those of you who are just joining us, you're watching Arirang TV's special coverage of South Korea's 21st presidential election. It's just past 10 p.m. here in South Korea's Seoul, and ballot counting has been underway for about 2 hours now. Preliminary results are beginning to come, with exit polls showing a lead for Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung. Now, as we continue to track how voting unfolded throughout the day and what the early numbers may signal moving forward, we're joined now by Hans Schadl, professor of political science at Yonsei University. Professor, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Mokyun. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. So let's begin, Professor. So as we approach the halfway point in tonight's ballot counting, early results are slowly coming in, and alongside the exit poll results that I've mentioned, we see a forecast of 50% for Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party. So far, all of this happening, what stands out to you the most?
Well, it seems like a very comfortable win for Lee Jae-myung, and it seems as if the voters, after 6 months of uncertainty after ex-President Yoon's attempt to impose martial law, the public overall is sending a very strong message for change here. Lee Jae-myung seems to have commanded at least half the vote tonight. The exit polling is suggesting maybe somewhere between 50 to 52% is his total share. If that holds out, that's a pretty solid win, considering that there are more than 2 candidates. And what's also interesting is on the conservative side, Kim Moon-soo from the People Power Party, President Yoon's former party, not even possibly getting 40% of the vote. And Lee Jun-seok from the New Reform Party, who was going to be a kind of spoiler, it seemed, who potentially, had he united with Kim Moon-soo, could the two of them have put together a conservative coalition that would have kept the conservatives in power? Seems that's not panning out either. If Lee Jun-seok's vote total is projected in the exit polls ends up being about 7%. That means the two of them together would end up with about 45, 46%. So even if the conservatives had united, Lee Jae-myung still would have had a very comfortable lead tonight with most likely more than 50% of the vote. So I don't know if it's a thunderous judgment, as the leaders of the Democratic Party are now proclaiming just after the exit poll numbers came in, but it's a very solid win. And of course, Lee Jae-myung has his party, the Democratic Party, also in the majority in the National Assembly. So it's a chance, I think, for both Lee Jae-myung, who so narrowly lost his bid for the presidency in 2022 against former President Yoon. Now he's in power and he's got his party in control of the legislature. He can get quite a bit done if he wants.
So even though it's still kind of early, those numbers definitely seem to give us a sense of where we're headed towards. Now, Professor, also something to note for this election is that the early voting this year hit 34.74%, the second highest on record. So, but with this, both camps, rival party camps, have different claims about their, interpretation of this early voter turnout. How should we interpret these competing narratives?
Well, at the end of the day, all we can say is that the areas that seem to have the highest voter turnout, we go region by region, also end up being the areas where the Democratic Party traditionally has performed the strongest, and where I'm expecting, once we see the detailed breakdowns region by region, that the Democratic Party will probably have a very commanding lead. On the other hand, how much do regions really matter? That's also a question we'll have to dig deeper into the numbers to get a better sense, because I think increasingly with half the country's population living in Seoul and metropolitan Seoul, just outside the capital city, the Gyeonggi-do province, I think increasingly what might be mattering more in the elections will be how the districts within Seoul are voting. I mean, just as we talk about the southwest part of the country being a very strong Democratic Party stronghold, southeast traditionally being for the conservatives, likewise, some districts in the southern half of Seoul end up being very strongly People Power Party, strongly conservative. If we see some erosion, and I'm expecting we're going to see some considerable erosion for that party in those sections of Seoul, that might be very revealing. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories in the past couple of weeks from prospective voters, even my college students, saying that they really wanted to send a message that martial law was not acceptable, that an attempt to shut down the national parliament and throw the country back into military rule was not going to stand with the voters, and that the people had to send a very strong message. So what we might see is, even in some of the conservative regions, which so far are showing lower overall turnout, voters who go conservative, either some of them may have voted for a minor party candidate or even for Lee Jae-myung, who knows, but I think a lot of them may have just stayed home and let others vote this time around, and that's why we're seeing such high turnouts in the areas where the DP is strong, because it's in those areas where the public really wanted to send a strong call for change tonight.
And that's from the capital area.
Yes.
Now, what about from other regions, Professor? We've seen the candidates focus on specific regions as they held out their campaigns in the final run. How much do you think these geographical strategies still matter here in South Korea?
Well, we can see this time around that Lee Jae-myung really tried hard to win everywhere. He didn't just go within his bases, but he spent a lot of time in the southeast part of the country. I suspect he even spent a lot of time in southern Seoul. Why not? The country's not that hard to travel. There are all these new highways that have been opened up in the past 10 to 15 years. It's much easier now than before and quicker than before for candidates to make their way nationwide. Kim Moon-soo from the PPP, he also did a national tour, but only went to Gwangju, say in the southwest, once for the May 18th commemoration of the protests and the tragedy there in 1980. He commemorated that with Lee Jae-myung, but otherwise he did not go to Gwangju. He kept a lower profile in the southwest. I think the PPP realized that they weren't going to likely win the southwest this time around, where Lee Jae-myung, by contrast, I think he saw a window of opportunity to do better than expected in some of the traditional conservative strongholds, and we'll see how that plays out once the votes are counted.
We'll have to see how it unfolds. Now, Professor, as we speak about politics, we cannot always rule out cooperation with the legislative body, the parliament. As of now, the Democratic Party and its allies hold around 188 seats in the parliament, 300-seat parliament, and this surpasses the 180-seat fast-track threshold. What does this mean for the next president's ability to govern?
Well, assuming that it is indeed Lee Jae-myung, he's got a solid base now in the legislature that will be behind him. Of course, there's only one chamber in the legislature. There are a few smaller parties that will also likely work with the DP going forward. That's how they get their 188 seats. So I expect a honeymoon period for Lee Jae-myung. But as we have seen in previous presidencies, sometimes that honeymoon doesn't necessarily last long. So just as Lee Jae-myung, I think, was not taking for granted anything in the campaign cycle, I think when he's governing, he'll also have to not take for granted the DP and cooperation in the assembly. Since we still technically have a one-term presidency, I know there's been talk about constitutional change, but it seems that might go to the back burner now, I suspect. But that could also mean that Lee Jae-myung will have a honeymoon period that wears off. And if things go badly, or if there's a foreign policy mistake, or if, say, the trade negotiations with the U.S. don't go so well, or inflation persists, there's a whole variety of circumstances that can inhibit a president in terms of his or her ability to gain cooperation with the legislature. So I think Lee Jae-myung will have to be very careful, thinking in the past about how predecessors have often lost full confidence in the legislature as parties, even ruling parties, split into factions and gear up to the next election. So, if he is indeed the president-elect, Lee Jae-myung will have a window of opportunity to make some real impact, and I think he'll have to run with it and be judicious with it.
So while these numbers in Parliament will shape the president's legislative reality, the bigger picture is about the kind of public support they will walk in the office with. So regardless of who wins the election tonight, what kind of mandate do you think this election will give to the incoming administration?
Well, I think the public is going to remember, of course, that the DP-dominated National Assembly with Lee Jae-myung famously, climbing over a wall to get in, recording that. I think at that moment, the public really felt very strongly in December that this party and this leader of the party, who's now on track to winning the election, that they were on the side of democracy. So they'll be expecting the DP to live up to that. And I think also one problem that we've seen in Korean politics over the years is that the two parties policy-wise tend to agree close on a lot of issues, but they have difficulty closing the deal. So this time around, can the DP, with control in both the presidential office and the legislature, can they do something about affordable housing? Can they do things about innovation or small businesses? I've been reading a lot of commentary suggesting there's concern also that South Korea's economy is not only stagnating, but the industrial base here, the industrial technology sector is lagging a bit, stagnating in comparison to China. So there's a real competitiveness drive that's going to be needed from the government in the months and years to come. Can the DP deliver that?
So before we conclude our discussion, Professor, I want to ask, what do you think is the first real test for the leadership of the incoming president? You've mentioned competitiveness too, but what kind of challenge do you think will define their opening months in the office?
Well, we have to look to foreign policy for one thing, and Lee Jae-myung has been very careful in the campaign trail to suggest a more pragmatic approach to foreign policy. He's said many times that, the alliance with the U.S. is essential, that that's the core for South Korea, keeping that intact. And that will be maybe a challenge because, as we know, South Korea has been in negotiations with the Trump administration over trade. And the Trump tariffs still are sitting there, despite uncertainty in the U.S. with legal wrangling in the U.S. as to whether the tariffs might be rolled back or struck down by a court. For the time being, South Korea has to chart its course economically with the Trump administration. And over the past few months, with Trump in power since January, South Korea has been in somewhat of a limbo in its relationship with the U.S. Now it'll be time for the two countries to take that forward, and all eyes will be on Lee Jae-myung.
Right, so close cooperation with the United States. We'll have to watch that closely. Professor, we'll have to end our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you for having me, Mo-kyun.
Thank you.
요새 피어슴 청년들이 굉장히 사회 문제로 대두되고 있는데 그 부분에 대한 해결이 가장 먼저 이루어져야 될 거라고 생각합니다.
저는 일단 각자가 말하는 정책에 대해서 집중하고 그래도 5년이라는 길다면 길고 짧다면 짧은 시간 동안 본인이 말하는 거에 대해서 잘 지켜가는 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
기후와 관련해서는 조금 더 재생에너지나 뭐 이런 쪽에 조금 더 관심을 가지고 탈원전 정책에 조금 더 관심을 가지는 그런 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
대학 서열화를 끝내고 그리고 사교육 시장을 줄이는 방향으로 좀 더 평등한 교육 정책을 위해서 애써야 되지 않나 이런 생각을 갖고 있습니다.
누가 돼도 상관은 없지만 그 공약을 하셨다면 하나라도 지켜주는 게 있었으면 좋겠어요. 아무래도 자영업 쪽에 있다 보니까 자영업자 쪽에 조금 더 신경을 써줬으면 좋을 것 같아요.
일단 기본적으로 주거 안정이 좀 제대로 이루어졌으면 하는 바람입니다.
없는 분들을 좀 생각해서 서로가 나눔의 실천을 했으면 좋겠어요.
아무래도 제가 이제 30대 초반이다 보니까 이제 결혼 이런 관련해서 정책들이 물론 지금도 잘 나오고 있는 것 같은데 아직도 청년들이 좀 결혼을 준비하는 데 있어서 어려움을 겪고 있기 때문에 결혼 문제에 있어서 좀 이제 정책 같은 것도 좀 더 많이 완화되고 대출 규제라든지 이런 것들 많이 좀 풀어졌으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 있습니다.
And that wraps up our special election night coverage for this hour. But do stay with us. Our team returns at midnight as we continue to track the vote count and edge closer to seeing who may become South Korea's next leader. Until then, thank you for watching and good night.